Sometimes the people carrying the heaviest pain are the ones who smile the most. The rain came down in silver sheets across Manhattan, turning the city lights into blurred streaks of gold and white. Most people hurried past with their heads lowered and their umbrellas tilted against the wind. No one wanted to be outside on a night like this. No one wanted to stop. Ethan Montgomery sat in the back of his black SUV as it waited at a red light on Lexington Avenue. His eyes remained fixed on the glowing screen of his phone, scanning quarterly reports and acquisition numbers worth hundreds of millions of dollars. It was nearly 10 o'clock. Another 14-hour workday. Another evening that felt exactly like the one before it. The driver glanced into the rearview mirror. Heading home, Mr. Montgomery? Ethan barely looked up. After one more call. His voice was calm, controlled, empty. 3 years had passed since he had lost the last person who made home feel like home. Since then, work had become easier than feeling. Numbers made sense. Spreadsheets made sense. Silence made sense. People rarely did. The traffic light changed. The SUV rolled forward. Then Ethan noticed something through the rain-streaked window. At first, it was only a figure sitting alone beneath a bus shelter. Just another stranger trying to wait out the storm. But something made him look again. The woman wasn't looking at her phone. She wasn't checking the street for a bus. She wasn't moving at all. She sat perfectly still on the metal bench, her shoulders trembling beneath a soaked gray coat. Her head was lowered. Both hands clutched a small cardboard box against her chest, as though it contained something fragile. Something priceless. Ethan felt an unfamiliar pull in his chest. "Slow down," he said. The driver looked surprised but obeyed. As the vehicle passed the shelter, Ethan finally saw her face. Claire Bennett, the waitress from the restaurant near his office. He recognized her immediately. The quiet blonde woman who always remembered every customer's order. The woman who somehow managed to smile after serving hundreds of people every day. The woman who never seemed to ask anything from anyone. Tonight there was no smile. Rainwater slipped from strands of pale hair pressed against her cheeks. Tears mixed with the rain, impossible to separate. She looked completely alone. Not dramatic. Not attention-seeking. Just broken in the quietest way imaginable. The SUV continued another 50 feet before Ethan suddenly spoke again. "Stop the car." The driver hit the brakes. Ethan stared through the rear window. Claire remained on the bench, holding the box tighter. Around her, the city rushed forward without noticing she existed. Taxis splashed through puddles. Pedestrians hurried by. Nobody stopped. Nobody looked. Ethan glanced at the expensive watch on his wrist. He had another meeting scheduled in 30 minutes. 3 unanswered emails waiting. A merger negotiation beginning at sunrise. Every logical reason told him to leave. Yet he couldn't, because for one brief second, he saw something painfully familiar in Claire's eyes. Not weakness, not defeat, grief. The kind that arrives when the world keeps moving after yours has stopped. Ethan opened the car door. Cold rain immediately swept inside. The driver blinked in confusion. "Sir." Ethan stepped onto the wet pavement and reached for the umbrella resting beside him. Across the street, beneath the glow of a flickering street lamp, Claire sat alone with her small box and her silent tears. And for reasons he couldn't yet explain, Ethan Montgomery knew he wasn't walking away. Claire did not notice Ethan approaching until a shadow blocked the rain. She looked up slowly, startled to find a dark umbrella stretched above her. For a second, neither of them spoke. The city seemed to fade into the background, leaving only the sound of rain tapping against the fabric overhead. Ethan stood there with one hand in his coat pocket and the other gripping the umbrella. He looked different outside the polished world of conference rooms and business magazines. Less distant, more human. Claire quickly wiped her eyes and forced a small smile. It was the same smile she gave customers every day. Professional, polite, meant to hide far more than it revealed. "Mr. Montgomery," she said softly, "I did not expect to see you here." Ethan glanced at the cardboard box in her arms. The edges had become damp from the weather. Whatever was inside, she was protecting it more carefully than herself. "I could say the same thing," he replied. Claire looked away. Across the street, headlights reflected in the puddles like scattered stars. "Long day," she said. "I should probably get going." But she made no effort to stand. Ethan noticed that. Sometimes people said they were fine because the truth felt too heavy to explain. He knew that feeling better than most. "You always seem happy at the restaurant," he said. "I guess I believed that was who you were." A faint laugh escaped her lips. Not bitter, just tired. People usually believe what they see. The words hung between them. Ethan lowered himself onto the far end of the bench, careful to leave space between them. Claire looked surprised. Most wealthy executives did not sit at bus stops in the rain. Most did not pause their lives for strangers. Yet here he was. For a while they simply listened to the storm. Then Ethan noticed a photograph partially visible through the opening of the box. A young man, early 20s, bright smile, clear blue eyes remarkably similar to Claire's. The picture had been framed once. Now the glass was gone. Claire followed his gaze. Her fingers tightened around the box. "My brother," she said quietly. Ethan nodded but did not ask another question. Somehow she appreciated that more than sympathy. His name was Noah. Her voice nearly disappeared beneath the rain. He always loved storms. Ethan remained silent. Claire swallowed hard. "When we were kids, he used to run outside whenever it rained. My mother would yell at him from the porch. He never listened." A small smile appeared. This one was real. Brief, but real. Then it faded. Today was his memorial service. Ethan felt something tighten inside his chest. Suddenly the box made sense. The photograph. The tears. The emptiness in her eyes. Claire looked down at her hands. Everyone left hours ago. Family. Friends. Neighbors. They all went home. She stared at the picture. "I guess I was not ready to." The rain continued to fall around them. Cars passed. The city moved forward exactly as it always did. But on that bench, beneath a single umbrella, time seemed to slow. Ethan looked at the photograph once more. He had never met Noah Bennett. Yet there was something about the young man's smile that made him pause. Something strangely familiar. Something he could not explain. And for the first time that night, Ethan realized this chance encounter might be far more important than either of them understood. Claire stared at the photograph for several seconds before carefully sliding it back into the box. The movement was gentle, almost protective, as if every memory inside could still be damaged by the world outside. Ethan watched quietly. He had spent years in boardrooms where silence was used as a strategy. This felt different. This silence carried weight. Meaning. Humanity. The rain softened slightly, turning from a steady downpour into a mist that drifted through the glow of the streetlights. Claire brushed a strand of wet hair behind her ear and looked toward the empty street. "I should probably head home," she said. Yet again, she remained seated. Ethan understood. Sometimes home was the last place a grieving person wanted to be. Home meant empty rooms, empty chairs, empty conversations. "Was Noah younger than you?" he asked. Claire nodded. 3 years younger. A small smile appeared. He spent most of his life acting like he was 3 years older. Ethan found himself smiling back. "That sounds familiar." Claire glanced at him. "You have siblings?" Ethan looked away toward the traffic. "I did." The words came out before he could stop them. Claire did not press for details. She simply listened. Somehow that made speaking easier. "My younger brother passed away a long time ago." Claire lowered her eyes. "I am sorry." Ethan nodded. "Thank you." For a moment neither of them spoke. Then Claire laughed softly. "Noah would hate this." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Hate what?" "Seeing me sit in the rain crying." Her smile grew a little stronger. He was always the optimistic one. She opened the box and carefully removed a folded piece of paper. The edges were worn from years of handling. He used to leave notes everywhere. Ethan watched as she unfolded it. Her eyes filled with emotion again, but this time there was warmth mixed with the sadness. "What does it say?" Claire looked down at the handwritten words. "It says, Claire, stop worrying so much. Life is happening while you are making backup plans." Ethan let out a quiet breath. "Sounds like good advice." "I never listened." "Most people do not." The corners of Claire's mouth lifted slightly. It was the first genuine expression Ethan had seen from her all evening. Then her phone vibrated. She checked the screen. The smile disappeared. Ethan noticed the change immediately. "Everything okay?" Claire hesitated. "Just another reminder." "About what?" She looked embarrassed. "Bills." Ethan nodded slowly. The answer explained more than she realized. He had seen enough financial reports to recognize stress when it appeared on someone's face. Yet there was no self-pity in her voice. No request for help. Only quiet endurance. Claire carefully returned the note to the box and closed the lid. "People think grief is the hardest part," she said. "Sometimes it is everything that comes afterward." Ethan felt those words settle heavily in his chest. Because he understood them. More than she knew. The rain finally began to ease. Across the street, the clouds started breaking apart, revealing a faint ribbon of moonlight above the skyline. Claire stood, holding the box close once more. Ethan rose beside her. Neither realized that the photograph tucked inside that simple cardboard box carried a connection between their lives. A connection neither of them was ready to discover. Not yet. Claire adjusted the strap of her worn shoulder bag and looked toward the intersection where the walk signal had finally appeared. The storm was almost gone now. Only a light drizzle remained, drifting through the cool night air. Ethan expected her to say goodbye and disappear into the city. Instead, she hesitated. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For stopping." Ethan slipped his hands into his coat pockets. "You do not have to thank me for that." Claire gave him a look that suggested she disagreed. Most people would have kept driving. The truth was, she was right. Ethan knew exactly how many times he had done that himself. Not because he was cruel, simply because he had become accustomed to moving forward. Deadlines, meetings, flights, deals. The next objective always waiting. Stopping had become a luxury. Somewhere along the way, he had forgotten how to do it. Claire started walking toward the subway entrance. After a few steps, she turned back. "Good night, Mr. Montgomery." "Good night, Claire." She disappeared down the station stairs, carrying the small cardboard box against her chest. Ethan remained where he was for a moment longer. The city noise gradually returned. Car horns, distant sirens, the rumble of trains beneath the pavement. Yet his thoughts stayed fixed on the young woman who spent her days serving coffee and meals with a smile that hid an entire world of struggle. His driver opened the SUV door. "Everything all right, sir?" Ethan nodded. Yes. But he was not entirely sure that was true. During the ride home, he found himself staring out the window instead of reviewing financial reports. Images replayed in his mind. The photograph, the handwritten note, the way Claire had spoken about her brother, the way she protected that box as though it contained pieces of her heart. By the time he arrived at his penthouse overlooking the East River, it was close to midnight. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a skyline most people dreamed of seeing. Yet the apartment felt as empty as ever. Ethan loosened his tie and walked past rooms filled with expensive furniture that rarely served a purpose. Success had given him space. It had not given him peace. He stopped beside a bookshelf in his study. On the highest shelf sat a framed photograph. A smiling teenage boy standing beside a younger Ethan. His brother, Daniel. Gone for nearly 15 years. Ethan stared at the image longer than usual. Claire's words echoed in his memory. Sometimes it is everything that comes afterward. He understood that sentence more deeply now. Loss never truly left. It simply changed shape. His phone buzzed on the desk. A reminder for an investor meeting scheduled at 7 the next morning. Ethan silenced it. Then another thought surfaced unexpectedly. Claire had mentioned bills. She had mentioned being alone after the memorial service. And despite carrying all of that weight, she still showed kindness to strangers every day. The contrast unsettled him. Before going to bed, Ethan opened his laptop. Almost without thinking, he typed a single name into the search field. Claire Bennett. He stared at the screen for a moment before closing it again. No, not tonight. Some stories deserved patience. Some people deserved respect. And somewhere across the city, while Claire sat alone with memories she was still learning how to carry, neither of them realized that Noah Bennett's story was not over. In fact, the truth connecting their lives had already begun quietly moving toward the light. The next morning arrived wrapped in pale sunlight and lingering clouds. Manhattan looked cleaner after the storm, as though the rain had washed away a layer of noise. Claire stood behind the counter of Harbor House Cafe just after 7 o'clock, tying her apron and preparing for the breakfast rush. To everyone around her, she looked exactly the same. Calm, reliable, professional. Yet exhaustion lingered behind her eyes. Grief had a way of stealing sleep while leaving responsibilities untouched. Orders arrived. Coffee cups filled. Plates moved from kitchen to table. The world continued asking for things. Claire continued giving. Around 9 o'clock, an elderly customer entered carrying a worn cane and a folded newspaper. Claire immediately recognized him. Mr. Reynolds. He came every Thursday morning and always ordered the same thing. Scrambled eggs, wheat toast, and black coffee. "Good morning, Mr. Reynolds," she said warmly. "Your usual?" The old man's face brightened. "You remembered." Claire smiled. "Of course I did. 20 minutes later, while delivering his breakfast, she noticed him quietly searching through his pockets with growing concern. "Something wrong?" she asked. Mr. Reynolds looked embarrassed. "I think I left my wallet at home." He began gathering his things. "I am sorry. I will come back later." Claire gently placed the plate in front of him. "Your breakfast is already here, but I cannot pay for it." "Then pay next time." The old man stared at her. "You are sure?" Claire nodded. "Everyone deserves breakfast." Across the room, a man seated near the window happened to witness the exchange. Ethan Montgomery lowered his coffee cup without taking his eyes off Claire. He had entered 15 minutes earlier without her noticing. Part of him had expected to discover some hidden explanation for her kindness. Some reason, some advantage. Instead, he watched her treat every customer exactly the same. The tired construction worker, the young mother with 2 children, the elderly man who forgot his wallet. No cameras, no audience, no recognition, just quiet generosity. Ethan found himself thinking about Noah's note again. Life is happening while you are making backup plans. For years, he had measured value through outcomes, results, efficiency. Yet Claire seemed to move through life measuring something entirely different. Human moments, human dignity. Before leaving, Ethan paid his bill and stood. Claire approached with the receipt. "Good morning, Mr. Montgomery." Her expression revealed genuine surprise. "I did not expect to see you here." "Neither did I," he admitted. A faint smile touched her lips. Then she handed him the receipt folder. Ethan glanced at it before noticing something tucked beside the paper. A small handwritten note. At first he assumed it was accidental. Then he opened it. The message contained only 6 words. "Have a better day than yesterday." Ethan stared at the sentence longer than he expected. Such a simple thing. Yet nobody had written something like that to him in years. Perhaps decades. When he looked up, Claire was already helping another customer. She had not written the note for praise. She had not even waited to see his reaction. Ethan carefully folded the paper and slipped it into his jacket pocket. And for the first time in a very long time, he walked out of a cafe, carrying something money could never buy. That evening, Ethan sat alone in his office long after most of the city had gone home. The lights of Manhattan shimmered beyond the glass walls, but his attention remained fixed on the small handwritten note resting beside his laptop. "Have a better day than yesterday." 6 simple words. Yet somehow they carried more weight than the polished speeches he heard at corporate events every week. He reached for the note again, reading it one more time before placing it carefully inside his desk drawer. Then his phone rang. The caller ID displayed a familiar name. Dr. Susan Keller. Ethan answered immediately. "Susan, I hope I am not interrupting." "Not at all." There was a brief pause. "I was reviewing some records today," she said. "Actually, I was organizing files from the Transplant Foundation archive." Ethan leaned back in his chair. His expression softened. The foundation was one of the few causes he supported personally. Years earlier, a donor program had helped save someone he loved. It was a chapter of his life he rarely discussed. "What about it?" he asked. "One of the donor files caught my attention." Ethan listened quietly. "The family requested complete privacy at the time," Susan continued. "Everything was sealed. But some restrictions expired recently, and I realized there was information that had never been updated." Ethan frowned slightly. "Information about whom?" Papers shuffled on the other end of the call. "About the young man who became an organ donor several years ago." Ethan stared toward the city lights. Something about the timing felt strange. And his name was Noah Bennett. The room suddenly became very still. Ethan's fingers tightened around the phone. Noah Bennett. The same name Claire had spoken beneath the rain. The same smiling face from the photograph inside the cardboard box. For several seconds he said nothing. "Ethan," Susan asked gently, "are you there?" "Yes." His voice sounded distant even to himself. "I am here." Susan continued carefully. "I only called because I remembered you asking years ago whether the donor's family was ever contacted. The answer was no. They requested privacy. But according to the updated file, his sister remained listed as next of kin." Ethan closed his eyes. Images rushed back. Claire holding the box. Claire talking about her brother. Claire standing behind the cafe counter, offering kindness to strangers despite carrying grief most people never saw. The connection was no longer a possibility. It was real. "What was the date?" Ethan asked quietly. Susan gave him the information. The date matched perfectly. Every detail matched. When the call ended, Ethan remained motionless. Outside, traffic flowed through the city like rivers of light. Inside, something had shifted. Not because of money, not because of business, because years ago, during one of the darkest seasons of his life, Noah Bennett's final gift had changed another family's future forever. And Claire had never mentioned it. She had never used it for sympathy, never sought recognition, never even hinted at the truth. Ethan looked out at the skyline and felt a deep respect settle inside him. For the first time, he understood why meeting Claire felt different. She carried loss with grace. She carried sacrifice without expectation. And now he faced a question that would not leave him alone. If Claire discovered the truth connecting their lives, would it heal something inside her, or reopen a wound that had never fully closed? For the next several days, Ethan carried the truth alone. He told no one, not because it was a secret he wanted to keep, but because he understood that some truths belonged to the people who had lived them. Claire continued her routine without knowing anything had changed. Every morning she arrived before sunrise. Every evening she left after serving her final customer. The city saw a waitress. Ethan now saw something else. He saw the sister of a young man whose final act of generosity had reached farther than anyone could have imagined. One Thursday afternoon, Ethan entered the cafe and found Claire standing on a small ladder near the front window, replacing a faded seasonal display. A manager hurried past carrying boxes while customers filled nearly every table. The place buzzed with the familiar rhythm of ordinary life. Claire climbed down carefully and nearly laughed when she spotted him. "You are becoming a regular." Ethan smiled. "That sounds dangerously close to a compliment." "Do not get used to it." The playful response surprised both of them. For a moment, Claire looked lighter than she had since the night of the storm. They spoke briefly before another customer called her away. Ethan took a seat by the window and watched as she moved through the room. Not rushing, not complaining, simply helping wherever she was needed. About an hour later, he noticed her speaking quietly with the manager near the kitchen entrance. The conversation seemed tense. Claire listened, nodded politely, then returned to work with the same professional smile she always wore. But something had changed. Her shoulders seemed heavier. Her smile did not quite reach her eyes. When the lunch rush finally ended, Ethan approached the counter. "Everything okay?" Claire hesitated. "It is nothing." Ethan waited. She looked down at the coffee cup in her hands. "The building where I rent my apartment was sold." "That sounds serious." "The new owners are increasing the rent." She forced a small smile. "Apparently the neighborhood is becoming fashionable." Ethan frowned slightly. "And?" Claire shrugged. "And I cannot afford fashionable." She said it lightly, almost like a joke. Yet Ethan could see the concern behind her expression. Another burden. Another challenge arriving before she had fully recovered from the last one. "I will figure something out," she added quickly. "I always do." Ethan believed her. That was what made the situation difficult. Claire never asked for help, never expected rescue. She faced every obstacle the same way she faced grief. Quietly, with dignity. Later that evening, Ethan sat alone in his office looking at a proposal his legal team had prepared months earlier. It was a charitable housing initiative that had remained untouched on his desk because other priorities always seemed more urgent. Tonight, he opened the file again. Then he spent the next 2 hours making calls. Not for Claire specifically. Not because he wanted credit. Because she had reminded him of something he had forgotten. Every statistic represented a real person. Every problem belonged to someone's life. And somewhere across the city, unaware of the decisions unfolding behind the scenes, Claire Bennett was still carrying the weight of tomorrow alone, while Ethan quietly began searching for a way to honor a debt that money alone could never repay. Weeks passed, and autumn slowly settled over the city. The trees lining the sidewalks turned shades of gold and amber, while cooler winds swept between the buildings. Claire continued working long shifts at the cafe, saving every dollar she could while searching for a new apartment. Some evenings she returned home exhausted. Other evenings she returned worried. But every morning she showed up with the same kindness that seemed impossible to run out of. One Tuesday afternoon, a large envelope arrived at the cafe addressed to her. Claire frowned as she examined the unfamiliar return address. Several co-workers gathered nearby, curious. "Open it," one of them said. Claire carefully unfolded the letter inside. As she read, confusion crossed her face. Then disbelief. Then silence. "Claire," her manager asked. "What is it?" She looked up slowly. I do not understand. The letter explained that she had been selected for a new housing assistance program designed to help working residents remain in their communities despite rising costs. The program would cover a significant portion of her rent for the next 3 years. Claire read the words again, then a third time. It felt unreal. You applied for this? A coworker asked. No, she shook her head. I have never even heard of it. That evening she sat at her small kitchen table studying the documents. Everything appeared legitimate. The signatures, the approvals, the contact information. Yet she could not stop wondering why she had been chosen. Across town, Ethan reviewed reports from the same initiative. Hundreds of families had already received assistance. Hundreds more were being evaluated. The project had grown far beyond its original scope. And exactly as he intended, Claire's name appeared nowhere special on the list. She was simply one recipient among many. No favors, no exceptions, no spotlight. A few days later, Ethan stopped by the cafe before work. Claire greeted him with a smile that seemed brighter than usual. Good morning. Good morning, Ethan replied. You seem happy today. Claire laughed softly. Maybe I am. She poured his coffee and leaned against the counter. Something unexpected happened. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Good unexpected? Very. She told him about the housing program, about the letter, about the relief she felt after months of uncertainty. Ethan listened quietly. Sounds like someone wanted to help. Claire looked down at the coffee pot in her hands. Maybe. Then she smiled. Or maybe the world just decided to be kind for once. Ethan smiled back, but said nothing. Because the truth was larger than a single program. Larger than any one person. The truth was that Claire had changed him. Not through speeches. Not through demands. Simply by living with grace when life gave her every reason not to. As Ethan prepared to leave, Claire handed him another small note. He unfolded it outside the cafe. The message contained only one sentence. Kindness travels farther than we ever see. Ethan stared at the words for a long moment. Then he folded the note and placed it beside the first one in his pocket. Neither of them realized that an even greater truth was approaching. The truth about Noah. The truth about the gift he left behind. And the truth that would soon reveal just how deeply their lives had been connected all along. Nearly a year later, spring rain returned to Manhattan. It was gentle this time, drifting through the city like a memory instead of a storm. Claire stood beneath a white canopy in Bryant Park, surrounded by hundreds of students, families, and community leaders gathered for the inaugural Bennett Scholars Ceremony. She still could not quite believe it was real. 6 months earlier, she had received an invitation from a nonprofit foundation announcing the creation of a scholarship program honoring individuals whose quiet acts of generosity had changed lives. When she arrived that morning, she froze. The banner stretched across the stage carried a name she knew by heart. The Noah Bennett Memorial Scholarship. Claire stared at the words as emotion rose in her chest. For a moment she could not breathe. For a moment she was back on that rainy night, holding a cardboard box and wondering how the world could continue after losing someone she loved. Miss Bennett, a voice asked softly. Claire turned. A foundation representative handed her a folder. Inside were letters from scholarship recipients. Future teachers, nurses, engineers, young people whose education would be funded because of a program established in Noah's memory. Claire's hands trembled as she read. One student wrote about being the first person in her family to attend college. Another described working 2 jobs while caring for an aging parent. Every letter carried hope. Every letter carried possibility. Tears filled Claire's eyes. Not tears of grief this time. Tears of gratitude. Later, during the ceremony, the foundation director stepped onto the stage. Today we celebrate a young man whose kindness continues to reach people he never had the chance to meet. Claire listened as stories unfolded. Stories of generosity, service, quiet sacrifice. Then the director paused. There is one more person we would like to recognize. The crowd grew still. A woman who reminded us that dignity and compassion are often strongest when nobody is watching. Claire looked around in confusion as her name was announced. Applause filled the park. She stood frozen. Then she slowly walked to the stage. Among hundreds of faces, one stood quietly near the back of the crowd. Ethan Montgomery. Their eyes met. For a second, neither moved. Then Claire understood. Not every detail. Not every decision. But enough. After the ceremony ended, she found him standing beneath the branches of a flowering tree. Rain tapped softly against the leaves overhead. "You knew," she said. Ethan nodded. "For a while." Claire looked down. "Why did you never tell me?" Ethan smiled gently. "Because it was never my story to tell." Silence settled between them. Comfortable. Honest. Claire looked toward the students celebrating with their families. "Noah would have loved this." "I think so too." She smiled through tears. "You helped make this happen." Ethan shook his head. "No. Noah did. You did. I just stopped long enough to notice." The rain continued falling softly around them. Not as a symbol of loss. As a reminder. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness travel farther than anyone can measure. Sometimes a note, a smile, or a moment of compassion changes a life without ever knowing it. And sometimes the people who carry the deepest pain leave behind the brightest light. As Claire looked toward the crowd, she realized something beautiful. Noah was gone, but his kindness was not. It lived in every student receiving an opportunity, every family finding hope, every person choosing compassion over indifference. And somewhere beyond the noise of the city, beyond success and failure, beyond grief and time itself, life continued exactly as Noah once promised. While everyone else was busy making backup plans,